I mean, you just have to put in, 80 to 100 hour weeks every week.
If you want to win, you have to outcompete the man who's prepared to do nothing but work. It's player versus player.
If you're not willing to do more than you're being paid for, you'll never be paid for more than you're doing. Giving is one of the laws of the universe.
Is it just me, or does it feel like people are constantly trying to program us to work more and more? I entered the workforce when I was about 14 years old, and it wasn't really out of necessity, more so just because I wanted a little bit of extra money to spend with my friends. I started off as part-time, but I definitely felt like they would have preferred that I worked more. But what were they gonna do? I was underage and still going to school. I can easily say that that's no longer the case, and it stopped being the case before I even graduated from high school too. The second I turned 18, the place I worked at just assigned me a full-time position. I remember getting home at like 3 a.m, sleeping 3 hours just to wake up at 6 so I could make it to school on time. Eventually, after like 8 months, they let me go because I wasn't working hard enough. The fuck did they expect? I was struggling to just make it through school as it was. I constantly fell asleep through class and didn't even have time to finish most of my assignments. Fast forward 10 years, and honestly, I can admit that it's gotten worse. Long gone are the days where you could just show up to work, do what you were hired for, and then leave after 8 hours. And then to add more on top of that, your shitty boss is constantly adding more and more to the list of things that you have to do without really increasing your pay at all. The more time has gone by, the more it's begun to feel as though I'll never exit the rat race. And now I know that these things aren't necessarily new. They've been going on for years, but it definitely has gone a lot worse lately. For example, that bald dude from Shark Tank complaining that millennials are quiet quitting because they refuse to do more than they were hired for.
If you're a quiet quitter, you're a loser. You're un-American.
Or what about those hustle bros using people's desperation to peddle their get-rich schemes only to pull the rug from under their feet? People are starting to feel hopeless, and it's honestly no surprise why. That's why I think Zom 100 is genius. Before I get ahead of myself, I want to set some expectations. I am not planning on making this into an anime/manga channel. The whole point of this channel is to put a magnifying glass on specific aspects of movies, series, and other sorts of media. If that sounds like your cup of tea, then I recommend you sub. But don't do it out of the expectation that I'll be making more anime content, despite the fact that I am planning on making more anime content. I also want to mention that I will be talking about death and suicide, so if these topics are too much to bear, you might want to skip this one. If there is a point in the video that you can skip to, I'll just put it here, but if you don't see anything, that's your sign to bounce. Anyway, the show drops us off right in the middle of a zombie apocalypse. We follow this guy running across the street as the city is shown to be in an extreme state of chaos and destruction. Eventually, as the camera pans out, we see that said man is actually being chased by a horde of zombies. Not just any horde of zombies, may I add. We're not talking about those slow-ass George Romero zombies, rather some cracked out 28 Day Later ones. The camera pans out even further and shows that we were seeing a movie the whole time. It then pans to our main character. Y'all see this painfully exhausted and depressed man? This is Akira. He remarks that compared to going back to work, a zombie outbreak would feel like heaven. We then get to go back 3 years to see an Akira who just graduated from college and is entering the workforce. He snagged his dream job at a production company making commercials for large films, I think? I'm actually not too sure, but honestly that sounds kind of sick. He's introduced to his co-workers, his boss, and is eventually love struck when he meets the woman of his dreams, Saori Otori. After his first day is over, his co-workers invite him to go get some drinks. It seems like a lot of the workers show up and Akira is all around having a good time. He gets to know everyone a little bit and shares that he went to K University and that he played rugby. As Akira gets ready to tell everyone that he'll see them tomorrow, they all get up, put on their badges, and mention that it's time to go back to work. Confused, Akira follows along, waiting for his chance to go home to sleep. This opportunity doesn't come for another 3 days. It isn't much longer before Akira realized that he was working for an exploitative company. I'd like to stop here and explain the concept of karoshi. Now, this is a term that some of my fellow weebs may have heard about. This explanation is not for you, so let me cook. If you don't want to sit through this, just fast forward or something. At some point in the 1970s, the overwork culture in Japan became a very recognizable issue, so much so that the Japanese government was forced to acknowledge it. Salarymen, which is a position held in high regard in Japan, were being made to work longer and longer hours. Eventually, they were working so much that many didn't even have a chance to make it back home to shower and sleep. The workers were made to work overnight and many had to spend the nights at the office, which made many workers rely on heavy drinking just to make it through their days. This would culminate with salarymen being found drunk and unconscious in the middle of the night. These cases would continue to increase as the workers became more and more overworked, until it climaxed at its final phase, death, karoshi, aka death by overwork. As messed up as that may sound, I need you all to understand that many people try their asses off to assure that they can get a position as a salaryman, despite the chances of karoshi. The reason being is job stability. Any adult in the US knows the feeling of being disposable, that at some point, with no reason whatsoever, the company that employs you can fire you. No one is really safe. But in Japan, once you're hired by one of these companies, you're pretty much guaranteed a job for life. In most cases, they won't even let you go even if you fuck up, and in many aspects, they treat you almost like family. Sure, the work environment is fucked, but job stability isn't really all that great in the US either. Like I said, almost everyone is disposable, and people get let go for the most asinine of reasons. That being said, it doesn't excuse any of the bullshit leading up to karoshi. Sometimes people just die, and other times people end up taking their own lives, being unable to continue living such a miserable experience. While on the one hand, you do have this job for life, on the other hand, you're also stuck feeling this way for life. There is no end in sight. Akira continues to work day by day. He receives verbal and emotional abuse from his superiors, sees toxic behavior being directed to him and his co-workers, and is forced to abide by idiotic requests from companies demanding more and more work. His only beacon of light is Otori, but nothing is sacred. As it turns out, she's the CEO's lover, and he is subjected to the sounds of the CEO having his way with her several different times. And I think this is what finally ends up breaking him. Slowly, the color begins to disappear for Akira as he falls further and further into despair. He's essentially living only to work. One day he realizes that subconsciously he's trying to jump in front of a train to call it quits, and had it not been for a gate, he would have done it. Some point later, he is woken up by his alarm and he bursts into tears, not wanting to go back to work. He lifelessly puts on his uniform in his apartment brimming with garbage bags. The color is now completely gone. He stares at his TV but sees only static and can only hear his supervisors yelling at him. Stepping out of his apartment, he sees a notice telling him that he didn't pay the parking spot for his bike. So he heads down to the building manager's office. He rings the door but gets no response. Noticing that he's running late for work, he opens the door and walks in. As he heads in, he sees something that he didn't expect. The building manager is being devoured by a man. As the man, who is clearly a zombie, lifts his head, we see the first bit of color return. Akira quickly puts 2 and 2 together and flees for his life as several zombies chase him to the roof. As he runs, he notices that it doesn't really matter if he's late for work because people are turning into zombies. Actually, now that there are zombies, he never has to go back to work. And as this dawns on him, the color comes back. With a tremendous amount of joy, he eventually outruns the zombies. While chilling at a rooftop, he decides to head to Otori's home to confess his feelings for her. Once entering her apartment, he runs into the CEO and tells him that he quits and promptly pushes him off the building. This is definitely because he was a zombie and for no other reason. He then sees a zombified Otori and confesses that he's been in love with her since the first moment he saw her, before running away. He makes a stop at a conveni and picks up a notebook to write a bucket list of things to do, and the episode ends. It's kind of fucked up that a lot of the feelings that Akira felt will hit very close to home for a lot of us. Working like a cog in a machine can definitely drain the passion out of anyone. In the darkest of times, I remember wishing for things to turn to shit, just so I would have an excuse not to go back to work. It's so refreshing to see the colors come back to Akira when he realized he no longer had to go back to work, even if his situation was less than ideal. I've really been holding off on watching the rest of this anime, partially because I wanted to let more episodes come out before I continued, but mainly because I felt like this episode really embodied a feeling that I have felt in the past. I can't speak for the rest of the show, but I can definitely say that I'm hooked off of this episode. If you haven't started this anime for whatever reason, and what I described sounds interesting to you, you can actually watch it on Netflix, Hulu, and Crunchyroll. I know this one was a little darker than my other videos, so thanks for staying to this point. I'm not sure what movie or show I'll be talking about next, but it'll probably be an anime or an indie flick because I do want to support the WGA strike. That being said, like, sub, and hit the bell. If you have a movie you'd like me to talk about, then mention it in the comments. Also, let me know what you guys thought about this video. This has been Subtly Artistic, and I'll catch you guys next time. Okay, bye.